So you see, I'm in a blacked out room because, yeah, I told you I did a behavioral change and I asked my husband to help me invest in curtains so that way we can keep the house cooler, yes, but also I don't get exposed to aggressive sunlight that is blinding and can cause retina damage. And even though one floor, the main floor, does get a lot more sun because the sun does come through one of the side windows. He wants to have some kind of light, but the kitchen and the bedroom and the office, like my floor, um, doesn't get as much light. So that way it's like 50-50. He has the light, I have the darkness. He can choose to rest his eyes if he wants or not. And I can choose to get sunlight or not. And so that is an amazing thing where we both can have both of our worlds represented. So anyway, so yes, I'm sitting in darkness, but it's not too dark, it's not too light, it's perfectly fine. I woke up very balanced. I had a little bit of arm pain yesterday, but nothing major, nothing crazy. It was my right arm, but it was fine. I ate food, blew my nose, and it was great. But I also was thinking about, I was watching one of the Netflix movies about O.J. Simpson, and back when that all happened was right when I basically graduated from high school or got a GED, went into the military, and was on one of those mobilizations in the Air National Guard. And we were actually, in Florida at Tyndall Air Force Base and doing summer camp type of stuff. Why they call it summer camp? Because it's just exercises that we practice during the summer from all year round, doing stuff and preparing for whatever wartime scenario we have to prepare for. Back then it was the Iraq stuff, Kuwait. But anyways, the whole O.J. Simpson was televised. Somebody had a TV in their tent and they were saying, oh, look, it's the big white Bronco. They're chasing him. And that was before 9/11. That was like in 1994. That was before 9/11. That was before everyone, that was before the whole 9/11 was an inside job where the conspiracy world was birthed. This is before the conspiracy world. And so hindsight is 2020. So when I looked at that show, the Netflix documentary about O.J. Simpson, I didn't really know his history. All I knew was that he was a football star, and maybe he did a few commercials, he was famous, and then he allegedly killed somebody and was not convicted of it, but public opinion was so divided that you had no idea what to believe, really. So then if you just look at some of the evidence that was presented through different sound bites, you would automatically assume that he did it. But this is the thing about our society today. We are in the truth movement. What's the truth movement? Where every scenario is up for grabs. Every storyline, is up for grabs. And so I was thinking about when I was watching it and I learned about where his background, where he came from. He came from San Francisco, Potrero Hill. He came up through the ranks through USC. He was born in poverty, of course, during the 1960s. Oh my gosh. He was definitely a man of history, and his rise was so aggressive. He broke into the Caucasian world. He came from a world where it was, mostly black, and then broke into the Caucasian world. USC, and then Hollywood. And with football, and then Hollywood, and then all the different endorsements, the corporate America, the contracts, and then acting. I mean, he ran the gamut. He was given so much, not only pleasure in paradise, but so much access to so many different people that he would not really have access to if it wasn't for his fame and his ability and his charisma. And so I learned the other half of who this guy was just a couple days ago. And given that I'm a conspiracy theorist, and I will say, yes, I am a conspiracy theorist. I will not be ashamed to say I'm a conspiracy theorist, because there's always another storyline. Because I know how contrived things can be. I know how planned things can be. I know how programmed people can be, even myself included. Whether it's from my childhood, from Silicon Valley, even through the conspiracy movement and all the different pundits out there that are guiding thought processes and giving people confirmation biases. And so then people get stuck in these loops. And then you have to learn how to unstuck yourself and unstick yourself and find a different storyline to figure out if that's even, what you want to do. So watching that, and then I'm thinking like, oh my God, was that the first 9/11 was an inside job? And I was telling my husband, I don't think he did it. My husband's like, yeah, he did. And I'm telling my husband, I don't think he did it. I seriously don't think he did it. Because if it wasn't for all the racism stuff, okay, that Johnny Cochran used to build a case, and knowing how inflammatory South Central is around racism and the riots back then, and there's Rodney King and everything else, and police brutality. If it wasn't for all of that and Mark Furman giving them the perfect storm of being the racist policeman himself, allegedly, then it would have been about the evidence. It would have been about the evidence and whether or not his motive, if he had real motive, is jealousy motive enough to kill somebody? Well, circumstantial evidence can point any direction it wants. And so I was thinking, like, if it wasn't for all that racist stuff, and it was just on the evidence alone, all that evidence that was presented was circumstantial, and even some of the comments, some of the his friends and those who weren't his friends were saying, hearsay. Well, he said this, he said that, he told me this, he told me that. Well, he can't prove that in a court of law. Just someone saying, well, she said this or he said this doesn't mean that they actually said it. They could be lying. You don't know. You don't know really anything. And so when I'm looking at today's world, where reality and fantasy are like intermixed together, where you can't even tell the difference between reality and fantasy, okay? Because all the reality shows are manipulated, taking organic situations and manipulating them synthetically, no different than transhumanism, no different than everything that goes on right now in our society. There is a mixture of both reality, organic, and synthetic. So then I'm thinking like, oh shit, I wonder if the system, the men in black, whoever, the hidden hand, did something and then watched it play out. Well, why would they do that? Because that's how, when you poke a bear, you want to see how people react. When scientists, they want to see what happens when people are exposed to something aggressive. And there's politics, there's religion, there's science behind it, there's a justice system, there's what could be happening in the future when you go this way or that way. How are people going to react? How stuck will they be around a specific storyline? How much they will say this person is the enemy, this person, no matter what kind of evidence you show that would be contrary. Some people will always say this person is the enemy. So when you think about what happened with O.J. Simpson and with even Ronald Goldman, the Goldman, Fred Goldman and the sister, how entrenched they were and thought that O.J. did it because the glove, the shoes, the blood, and no alibi, okay? It's still all circumstantial. And then, of course, how flippant O.J. was during that time. And you don't know what O.J. knew when he knew it, back then. And so then you saw how steadfast people locked into a belief system around whether he did it or didn't do it. And so then my conspiracy mind was like, oh shit. And then watching Johnny Cochran, yes, pull the race card. Watching all these seasoned lawyers finding just enough reasonable doubt and then making a mountain out of a molehill. Like literally blowing things up so out of proportion, but also aligned with the current events and the climate of the day. It was like a perfect fucking storm. And everyone, of course, we didn't have cameras in the courtroom. I wasn't watching it back then. I was too busy doing other things, trying to survive. And you just gotta turn 18, 19, 20, and I'm not watching courtroom cases, but I did see that, some of it stuff, but not all of it. And so it was like such a new thing for people to watch courtroom events, courtroom dramas, and watching what, Christopher Darden saying, well, we shouldn't bring race into this because that's what then the jury will focus on. And he had a perfectly valid argument then, but Johnny Cochran just slammed him and said, you think that black people cannot be mature enough to separate race and this and that, and really just made Christopher Darden look like a total asshole. And so, wow, I'll tell you, and I didn't even know that Johnny Cochran used Adolf Hitler as a metaphor for Mark Furman, who may have said some things to the point of like, well, I think they should all be killed or whatever. I don't know if that's what's said. I'm not exactly quoting that correctly. But I'm like, holy shit, he went there. And which pissed off Fred Goldman, the father of Ronald Goldman. He's like, I can't believe he used, Adolf Hitler as a metaphor. And I've used that term with people who not only were against me, but also hating on other people, acting like Adolf Hitler's, acting like absolute power corrupts absolutely. And it's actually a pretty correct metaphor given what we've given people such absolute power, whether it's the police force or other people who think that their activism is a justification for death and destruction against someone that doesn't believe what they believe. And so, I mean, it's a correct metaphor, but it definitely left a mark on so many different people. And when you get people so emotional around a specific thing using inflammatory history, wow. And that was, I'll tell you, that was when I finally watched all of that Netflix documentary in its condensed version. I was thinking like, you know what? Anyone could have gone and done that. It could have been planned. Thrown a glove there, used his shoes. Why allegedly, why he would deny he even had those shoes. What shoes? The Bruno Magli shoes, the footprints that were at the crime scene. Why he would deny that, who knows? Given that they showed him in other tapings of him wearing the Bruno Magli shoes, and in some of his other commercials and on, whatever, in other areas of his life. So, why he would lie about that, I don't know, but that's the thing. And why would he run away? Why would he be in the Bronco with Al Callens running away with a passport and $10,000 or something? Because maybe he knew that he was being framed. Maybe he knew he was being framed, and if he can escape like Roman Polanski, where you can't be extradited, then he can plead his case somewhere where they can't extradite him. And if he has millions of dollars, what country is going to say, hey, I don't want your millions of dollars? And so the fact that he left and was trying to leave made him seem more guilty, but maybe he knew something was amiss. And so that whole thing, and then when he got off and everyone either loved him or hated him and all that, and then he goes and tries to steal his memorabilia back from somebody. And they taped that whole situation, so he couldn't get out of that. Someone taped that whole situation. Yeah, that guy, what's his name? Rocio, I forget his name. Taped him actually stealing that memorabilia. So there was no dispute whether or not he came in there and was making threats of like kidnapping, holding people against their will, and stealing back his stuff plus other items. Then the system threw the book at him. 9 years, from 33 years to 9 years. He finally paid his dues for whatever. And the other, with a civil case, where a jury of his peers who believed he did it, a civil case, he was told to pay however many millions of dollars. Yeah. So I mean, circumstantial evidence can make you or break you, and maybe it could make you in where you could get off in a criminal side, but a civil side, it could break you. That's why you lead an exemplary life. That's why you don't give anyone a reason to throw the book at you, give anyone a reason to build a case against you. Because you know the law, you're not addicted to alcohol, drugs, and crazy sex, and you're not living a high-risk lifestyle. You're not starving yourself or your children. You're not violating the laws of life in your body. So, because you don't want the system to build a case for your own demise. You don't want the system to build a case against you for whatever reason. And you're public about it. See, that's what the system wants. They want people to live exemplary lives, to be accountable for their actions, to repent when they need to repent, and to live out loud, live publicly. Because when you live publicly, you'll probably abide by the laws of your body, mind, and spirit, and of your community, versus living in the shadows and committing transgression in the shadows. And so the fact that we are in a surveillance society, the fact that we are living so publicly, then could build a case for or against you relative to your beliefs. And so when you are so biased, which I figured out, those who are so biased will be easily manipulated. And there is a hidden hand. I figured out the hidden hand in the frequency world, which is ULF, ultra low frequency. And then there's a hidden hand in our society, the men in black. Who are the men in black, Julian? The people you'll never know, who do or do not do stuff that you'll never know, whether it's synthetic, whether it's organic. You'll never fucking know. You'll never know. And so that's how the system develops the storylines. That's how the system gets people to go in whatever directions, is they develop situations. They poke bears. Bears that are easily reactive, who don't have discernment, who are under the influence, starving, and been fed all these different storylines in politics, religion, and science, who won't change. So when the system pokes people and they react in a certain predictable way, and they watch others react in the same predictable way, you know how easy it is to manipulate society and take them in a specific direction? That's why you have to understand what the system is doing and why, and understand all the storylines and understand science. Because then when you understand science, then you won't be as apt maybe to go fall into these religious beliefs, these biased political beliefs, or even some of these scientific beliefs that are one-sided, that are so heavily one-sided that people lay the groundwork for their own demise, and then they go and blame somebody else for it. That's why you understand all sides of the story, and you don't be so reactive. Because the reason why you know the things that you know, because the system gave you access to everything, all the links, all the different people, the pundits, the storylines, everything. Now you got to figure out how to discern what is going to save you, whatever that means, and what's going to harm you. And if you don't have discernment and you play to the storylines that are given to you through politics, religion, and science, you will lay the groundwork and develop a case against your own life and develop a case of a died suddenly, now or in the future. And then when people do die, and then you look at what they have done, and they were under the influence of cannabis, they were starving themselves, they were out there playing around, gallivanting, doing whatever, they were fighting conditions. What argument against the system do you have when you have already laid the arguments and developed a case against your life, your future death? So that's why it's imperative that you understand that evolution is necessary. Understand the laws of life and the laws of death. You choose for yourself. You don't choose for other people. You know what people are. They turn into religious fanatics, into converts. And they want to go and convert everyone around them. And that's why I say, if you're harming yourself with alcohol, drugs, and crazy amounts of sex, and you're putting yourself out there, taking a side against a person, place, or thing, reacting to the storylines out there, then you have no room to be critical of the system when you have actively harmed yourself in drugs, in alcohol, taking sides, enjoying someone's death and destruction, getting pleasure out of someone's death and destruction, regardless of status, whether it's a Rockefeller, Rothschild, or some janitor in some third world country. When you've already professed to be that biased and harming yourself, what argument against the system do you really have when you've chosen, despite all the information you've been given, okay, because you're not being withheld any information. The system is allowing you to hear all different sides. Doesn't mean that they're always going to agree or want to take a side. The system will give you both sides of the argument. They will have their intention. And they also will give you the choice. Then you're choosing. You're choosing your own destruction. You have no argument against anyone. And so that's the valuable thing I learned the last few days, is watching the hidden hand in the ULF, watching the hidden hand, even just speculating about the whole OJ case. If it wasn't for the racist thing, it would have been about the evidence. And it was all circumstantial evidence. If it doesn't fit, then to quit. Well, okay, yeah. But how did it get there to begin with? And then they're recording the police with no gloves, going through the crime scene, contaminating the crime scene. So OJ had so much money, and they were recording every single thing the police did. They were picking apart every person that was part of that whole situation, finding the little jewels that, someone said something racist one time and now it turns into, oh, they're racist, they planted it, this, that. You developed reasonable doubt. You developed a case. You made a mountain out of a molehill. And that's what the court system does. Especially if there are specific, that's what lawyers do. Really good freaking lawyers will find that one little kernel of what would cause someone to react so, aggressively to the information and blow it so out of proportion. But they don't even have to do that now. People are telling on themselves all over Facebook. You don't even need a good lawyer now. Just look at people's Facebook. Look at what they advocate. Love, love, love. Oh, look, I'm under the influence of cannabis. Oh, look, I like alcohol and drugs. Oh, look, I'm out there gallivanting. I'm out there in the sun developing solar retinopathy. Okay? I mean, the evidence, you don't even need a fucking good lawyer. Just look at people's Facebooks. Okay? And so they're developing a case for their future diet suddenly. They're remedying away their disease. They have health issues. I mean, geez. And so it's completely interesting watching the evolution from 1994 to 2024. That's insane watching it. And so, we were in the dark way back in the 1990s. And then 2001 came, 9/11 came, and then there was 9/11 was an inside job. Well, what if 1994, what if the O.J. Simpson case was an inside job? But again, you can't prove it. But remember, everything is compartmentalized. You have the Freemasons, Rosicrucians, the hidden hand, all the different things that we have studied in the conspiracy world. And I know when to pull conspiracy and when not to. Not everything is a conspiracy. Some things are organic. There's some people out there who have had parents who radicalize them to be such aggressive people that when triggered, they do damage to others. We are raising children that are that way. But when did that happen? Well, so many factors contributed to that outcome of a child being radicalized to destroy others. And then there's others that were in mental institutions or were in the military or who knows what and were radicalized to do things. And you'll never know exactly how it was triggered and what was triggered. You'll never know the true story behind it. But you've been given a choice. Stay home and stay safe. Don't be in the malls. Don't be out there in diverse company. Maybe not travel so much. Maybe watch out for this, and that. So the system still gives you a choice regardless if the events out there are contrived, organic, or part of the deterioration because of climate change, that even then you can argue whether or not that was contrived or organic or whatever. And, everyone can build a case for or against. It doesn't matter because you don't know if it's defense or offense. Okay? And so the system has already all the arguments in play, regardless of what side you take. It doesn't even matter. Can you prove? You could say it's geoengineered. Okay, potentially, yeah. So the sun's going through its cycle, and it's hotter over here for whatever reason. And so the system has aerosolized particles that reflect the sun back into the atmosphere versus up down there because it's in defense mode. So there can always be an argument to counter someone's biased argument. And you can still choose which side you want to believe in. But no matter what's the bottom line? Are you going to survive whatever arguments that are out there? If you're not going to survive anyways, and you're under the influence of alcohol, drugs, and mass amounts of SCX, and you're out there gallivanting in the sun so much, and you have a big family, and you're on diets and on remedies, and you're against the bees and against GMO and against air, food, and water, and you think everything is poison, it's not going to fucking matter if you think it's contrived or if you think it's organic, because you're not going to fucking survive. So what's the point of even arguing the point if you're not going to survive it? What's the point? Some people will wake up and they'll die from the wake-up process because they can't handle the energy conversion of their immune system waking up. It'll just take a certain frequency event or something else. They'll wake up their immune system and they don't survive immune system activation. So do you really think waking up people is going to help them if they can't even survive it, much less yourself? So that's what people have been gaslighted into. That's the activist conspiracy world. And again, I've been saying this many times, but it's interesting to watch. It's interesting to see past events that were in my lifetime. Okay, I mean, I'm 50 years old, exactly 50 years old, plus a few months. And I've seen a lot, I've experienced a lot. And so yes, hindsight is 2020. It definitely is 2020, and it's fascinating to watch. I'll tell you, it's fascinating to watch. And so I'm going to read this. Hidden hand. It's a noun. An unknown force or influence believed to be the cause of certain events, often unfortunate events. The hidden hand. Government war proxies and undetectable ULF, or the Men in Black. Remember that movie, The Men in Black? That's why you live an exemplary lifestyle, so you can establish a pattern of tolerance, diversity, and peace. But if you're under the influence and you hate so many different people, and if you have no discernment, they can do whatever, who say the system can do whatever the hell they want to you because you've established a pattern of destruction to yourself and everyone around you. So imagine those that are in the medical system, in the holistic system, selling remedies and supplements and drugs and alcohol and partying and gallivanting all over, knowing that we are in major climate change and it's dangerous out there, right? And so if you don't survive your lifestyle, well, the system already established a case of why you didn't survive, why you died suddenly, why, whatever, right? And you will buy their remedies, right? Believe me, the system can build a case against anyone they want to if you give them a reason. The all-seeing eye is they will tell you what to see and what not to see. The all-seeing eye. The hidden hand is their magic wand. And you can't prove a damn thing, and that's how the system gets you. That's their loophole. What did they know and when did they know it? Which means you have to be smarter than everyone around you who are reacting with their heads cut off. You have to be smarter than the average bear, literally and figuratively. You don't fuck with the government. And if you choose to sign on the dotted line to harm yourself through remedies and surgeries and diets and supplements, then you chose to develop a pathway to die suddenly at some point. You developed a case for your died suddenly. You don't fuck with the government. You let people choose their own demise and you make a choice for yourself. Whatever you choose, you chose. Here's all the information you chose. If you're a known drug addict, alcoholic, and someone who's fighting disease, if you sell remedies to people and you're an energy healing person, well, yeah, of course, died suddenly is in your future. The case was already built for your died suddenly. The very lifestyle you lead with the industry licenses, you and all the remedies you sell, even the cannabis you're addicted to, developed a case for died suddenly. For you and everyone that you have brought into your world. I said died suddenly. That's why you give the system no reason to destroy you, because you won't destroy yourself or anyone around you. That's why you don't attack anyone. You don't attack yourself. You don't attack your disease. You don't cut into yourself. You don't allow a proxy to cut into you, but people do. And so they have developed a case for why you would not survive climate change. You start changing and repenting. If you can't, the system will develop a case of why you died suddenly. Why your children are dying suddenly. And I will say starvation is the first main reason why people die, along with all the remedies and surgeries and unchanged lifestyle. Most of you are building a case for your own demise unless you change and you repent publicly what you have supported for so many years. Most can't do it. Most have built a religion around their future death, and they will justify it until the very end. Be careful what you wish for, because you will get it if you can't evolve. And so the hidden hand, right? Your aggressive bias reaction are their power. When you laugh in glee at someone's death and destruction, regardless of status, whether it's Rockefeller, Rothschild, some janitor somewhere else, you are a tool for the depopulation agenda, even Israel or Iran. Okay? When you harm yourself, regardless of why, you are part of the depopulation agenda. When you can't change or evolve, you are part of the depopulation agenda. The depopulation agenda is a choice, and it has been accelerated because you've already accepted death as an outcome, and you've justified it. Just look at all the spiritual healers out there and the religions. If you can't change the way you do things, you will depopulate yourself, and you will elicit the help from others. You will use government war proxies and call it healing. And there are so many people in Hollywood who will find a way to use frequency as healing and other remedies. And if you have no discernment, you will buy whatever the hell it is they're selling. I stay away from healers and dealers because they are selling you death and destruction and rest and peace. They can't handle their own pain of suffering, and so they must project that you can't handle it either. So they are the government proxies for death and destruction. They have licenses to prove it. And the remedies are FDA approved for the intention, even if it's abused. You want to save yourself? I don't know how you're going to do it if you don't even know what you're saving. And so the hidden hand, so zero, okay, when you think about particles and energy and dark energy, light energy, 0 equals ULF or hi-fi, undetectable or detectable. 1 is particle, 2 is particle, 3 is offspring. 0 equals perp or men in black, visible or invisible. 1 victim, 2 story, 3 the verdict. What's the outcome of that victim and that story? What were the main things that gave people the impression O.J. Simpson killed Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman? The glove at the scene could have been planted there. Bruno Mali's shoes, somebody else could have used those shoes. His DNA, he's a sports star with sports doctors who have access to his blood. Cut finger, hearsay. He told different stories about cut finger. Hearsay doesn't stand up in a court of law. No alibi. Not necessarily a reason to convict. Domestic violence pattern. Not all domestic violence perps murder people. Okay? But the system used that as a way to highlight these situations. Racism, domestic violence, and police brutality, and all that stuff. So it was a perfect storm to bring up issues that people were not focusing on until his trial. Why does this even matter, and why am I focusing on this? Because you don't know what happens behind the scenes. You don't know how the system directs society using aggressive images and even events. Not everything is an inside job, and some things are, and you'll never prove which ones are which. But always question everything. He was famous. O.J. Simpson was a famous, well-loved, very influential person. And his fall was just as great. And his fall was about race relations and police brutality. He put focus on domestic violence. Mark Fuhrman was an excellent detractor of the main situation, whether or not you believe he killed his wife or not, or lover or not. Fuhrman's racism was the bone Johnny Cochran could not pull away from It Was the Perfect Storm. And what was the compelling evidence? Well, I listed it out for you. And from that, I would say the jury did their job correctly. I think regardless of the argument, he was going to get off. There just wasn't enough evidence. Or Mark Fuhrman's situation cast enough reasonable doubt OJ did not murder, therefore was framed. And he could have very well been, but not through Mark. That's the irony. Okay? And you're like, when I watched that show and I saw the bodies and what kind of damage that was done to both Nicole and Ron, I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. I couldn't tell you if OJ was capable of that. But if you're looking at the case that was built against him and you didn't have discernment that there was other proxies involved, then you'd be like, oh, he did it. And most people think that he did it. They will say, I know he did it. He did it. Now, how do you fucking know? You weren't there. You don't know. You're just listening to those that are making those assumptions. But not even the jury knows if he did or not. It was whether or not the evidence pointed against him and the reasonable doubt was enough for him to be convicted or not. Which is why Shapiro did not like F. Lee Bailey, who glommed onto the racism card. Shapiro did not want the case to be about racism. It was about the evidence and whether or not the jury believed without reasonable doubt that O.J. Simpson committed those heinous murders. Where O.J. fucked up was when he got greedy around his memorabilia. That's when the system threw the book at him. But before that, he was acquitted from a double murder case. Johnny Cochran put Christopher Darden in his place. Yes, it was a first major reality show, a sign of what was to come. Hindsight is 2020. And I will say the arguments that Mark Fuhrman was like an Adolf Hitler was extremely well played. I hadn't watched that trials before the last couple of days when they gave us highlights in that Netflix movie. I did not even know Johnny Cochran used that metaphor against Mark Fuhrman. Because I've used that metaphor too against people who are very aggressively biased to the point where they want someone dead because of that you have a different belief. The system taking organic situations and manipulating events to the point where you can't tell between reality and fantasy, and I'm telling you, the victims of any situation will believe to the very end one or more people are responsible. But the only ones that are presented to them with circumstantial evidence. So if someone says this person did it and here's all the circumstantial evidence, but there was no proof that there was intention and all this other stuff, you will see people convict people in the media and wherever else in their own minds. It happened to me, and I wasn't even going through a court of law. It was just through public opinion and through articles. So I know from experience how people will perceive someone to be the enemy, and they will hate you for it till their dying day. And you've done nothing to them, you've done nothing to the other person that they think that you've hurt, and that's how people glom onto their beliefs with absolutely no way to change their mind. They have absolutely no reason to change their mind, and they won't, and they'll till their dying day. So even the Goldmans to their dying day will believe that O.J. Simpson murdered their son. But only the reasons that are presented to them with the circumstantial evidence. That's why circumstantial evidence can be very dangerous to use as a conviction tool, which is why proving intent is paramount, and even then, which is why you live an exemplary life so you don't get framed for something because you've shown a pattern. That's why you don't recommend people remedies and surgeries and sell them supplements. This was all before 9/11 was an inside job. Maybe that was the first inside job. That's how the public reacted to orchestrated events. They even say how the victim reacted to perpetrators given to them. They even saw how the victims reacted to the perpetrators given to them. Maybe that whole court case was a huge experiment. But I'm just speculating. I have no proof. But you saw how quick everyone reacted and took a side. Divide and conquer. Then look at the Jilly Juice world. How quick everyone wanted to condemn and convict me for the system developing the outcome of a person trying to do a Hail Mary who was set to die at some point in hospice, that even their own family gave up on them. And so you saw all the different articles. Maybe you did. Maybe you Googled it. Maybe you read that article from BuzzFeed, Newsweek, and Daily Mail, and whoever else. And they've already condemned me that I hurt somebody. I killed someone with salt and Jilly Juice. But there was no court case. There was no proof. It was just speculation. It was circumstantial evidence that it could have been anything. The person had pineapple juice, which is a known cough suppressant. When he was coughing, he should have been coughing out the antigen antibody programming, but he held it in, and maybe that could have killed him. But you don't hear people saying that argument because they don't understand how that shit works. They don't understand science. So they'll glom onto what the easiest belief is, and they can't wait to lay blame on someone or something. That's the O.J. Simpson case was proof how people could easily just blame something without really any evidence at all or science behind or anything. Just give them a reason to blame and they will do it. And now look at the anti-V world, look at the pro-V world, look at all the activists against GMO and organic and the air, food, and water, and then you'll see you're watching O.J. Simpson case yet again, looking for a scapegoat. Be very careful convicting and condemning someone. However, around the anti-everything, organic, anti-GMO, energy healing, anti-gluten, anti-food people, you'll see some people take that to the extreme with their children, starve their children, because they've been radicalized against food. And when you have a baby, and you've actually taken food away from your baby and children for whatever reason, and that baby or child died, yeah, that will be a national discussion, and the parents could definitely be convicted and condemned if it was something that was socially unacceptable. But what's socially acceptable is to have a food allergy. What's socially acceptable is to replace milk with soy. What's socially acceptable is to replace whatever food you're allergic to with something that's plant-based. No meat, no milk, no, major foods that you need. Sometimes it's even state sanctioned because of food allergies. Yep, you'll be splashed across the headline too if there's a death as a result of what could have been the reason why. Nowadays, kids are just dying suddenly, so no one is the wiser of how parents raise their children. They can just blame the VHCCINESs, which is a perfect scapegoat for the system, so that way they don't have to focus on what they need to focus on, unless you go into different political arguments around abortion, reproductive rights, and reproductive control. And the holistic world is so radicalized that I even fell into some of the bylines and felt the food was poison myself. I even thought so many things around food and children, and thank God I don't have any children. But I quickly realized all children need sugar, salt, milk, meat, gluten, fat, and everything that's appropriate for children and babies. Why are children dying? Because they are starving. Not only are the parents deficient in nutrients, but the children inherited the deficiencies and they can't get ahead, not in this environment. The particles have accelerated to such an extent nobody can get ahead unless they stay home and stay safe and change their lifestyle. That's why you stay out of people's health issues and you don't recommend them any supplements or detoxes or anything else. You might actually be helping the system destroy people and they won't convict you because it's state sanctioned. My thoughts around anything in the media, so question everything. When there's something aggressive in the media, question how they want you to react. Check your own reactions. Because most likely the way you initially react to any situation was how the system wanted you to react initially. If the system plays both sides, understand why both sides are being presented to you. Like IFL Science saying, stay home and stay safe, but here's the path to totality to watch the eclipse. You must have discernment to understand why they're telling you to stay home and stay safe. And if you don't understand all the stories and the science behind what's going on, you will ignore warnings and do whatever it is you want to do, even if it damages you. But you chose with your own free will. Ignorance isn't a choice when you've been warned, given both choices. The system wants you to love people, wants you to love certain people. The system wants you to hate certain people at any given time. Check your initial reactions around anything. Check your judgments around a situation. Why do you feel you need an opinion about what people do in their world? And if you do have an opinion of why somebody else's situation affects you, develop a compelling story how their situation affects your family, how somebody else's situation affects your decision making. You'll find that your opinions about what other people do has absolutely no bearing on the choices that you make. Like student loans, just so you know, life isn't fair. That's not a compelling enough argument against student loan forgiveness. On the other hand, if it's a major social issue around about how the government agencies and people treat each other in the public, even under authoritative conditions, I can see why opinions become national conversations. If you see behaviors and practices that contribute to what people are against, which is premature death, human trafficking, and destruction of the human genome, develop a compelling argument why certain behaviors may contribute to that. But that's it. Develop a compelling argument. Don't try to convert people. Don't ram your opinions down someone else's throat. But just simply have an opinion because it isn't fair to you. You're just an ordinary person with an opinion like an asshole. Opinions are like assholes. Everyone has them. How many people can articulate why it's so compelling enough that someone else's financial situation affects their life and their decision making? They can't. Most cannot even develop an argument for their own life, much less develop an argument why they even have an opinion about somebody else's life. Many people are like lemmings, and they just repeat what somebody else said, but very rarely develop an articulate argument around their opinions. They don't have time. They're too busy developing more opinions about other people's situations, but they haven't even rectified their own situation. So, OJ, Made in America, watch that. And did you know that holistic remedies are just as pharmaceutical grade as allopathic pharmaceutical grade prescription drugs? To say that naturopathics and holistic remedies are better than doctors and prescription drugs means you bought into the psychological operations. That belief system was planted in you like an inside job. You thinking the holistic market is better than the prescription drug market was an inside job. So when people die suddenly because they're on their prescription drugs and holistic remedies, they can blame the poisonous food supply and air and water and vaccines, and no one would care, right? Because nothing is poison if it's FDA approved. They'll just say that you're just a conspiracy person. But you remedying away your disease with everything under the sun, that is what's caused the eventual death suddenly, especially if you're starving, with food allergies and aggressive lifestyles. But no one wants to focus on that because they're making too much money off their friends and family and they can't handle pain and suffering and food. And yeah, layoffs in Genentech and other biotech companies, died suddenly, people who have beat cancer but they die. Okay, 36 years old, retaliation. U.S. urges the U.S. citizens to leave Iran now. I'm saying when you are laughing in glee that Israel was attacked by Iran through all those drones, you're not taking into account the retaliation factor. So I wouldn't be laughing in glee at those that were harmed in Israel, or if they were. I would not even be taking part in taking a side against anything. There might be a fake eclipse, who knows? All right, I'm not worried about the whole student loan shit. It doesn't matter what I think or what you think about people's financial situations. Spend your money how you see fit, make the choices. You're in climate change, economic changes, okay? What happens in another person's household has no bearing on you when it comes to their financial situation. A lot of sepsis has been recorded and heart failure. Okay. There is eclipse retinopathy when people stare at the eclipse and now they have eye issues. That's why I want to get sunglasses with little panels on the side to protect my eyes if I go fishing with my husband. What is VAERS? When the combo in the vax and the people triggered by ULF, which is ultra low frequency, the hidden hand, induces aggressive symptomatic behaviors. So when you're recording all of your symptoms from whatever VACCINES that you had, and it's from a virus, which is basically vital information resource under siege, which is basically frequencies that cause certain particles to attract to each other and develop and cause replication, then the ULF causing them to do replication in specific parts of the body, causing then symptoms. That's what the system is recording in VAERS. It's not that the VACCINES did it. It was the fact that the ULF triggered the VACCINES to do what it was meant to do, which is develop antibodies, but so much that people can't get ahead of their situation. So why is milk painful? Because the bowels need to move and you need to take a shit. Why is salt painful? Because you need to activate your immune system and your cells also need to take a shit. You eat food to retain, you eat food to rebuild, you eat food to release. You can't survive starving yourself or your children. You eat all food to live. People don't eat food and they die. That's why you die. You've been starving yourself for years. And so then look at the end. So this mirror-breaking social media influencer admits starving newborn son to death by trying to feed him with sunlight. That's the energy healing people. That's the sun gazers. That's all the breatharians. Look at the energy healing world. Those who say food is poison. Look at Everyone with food allergies, a stone's throw away from this. Starvation is why people die, causing heart attacks and strokes, and died suddenly. What they did to this child is no different than what people do to themselves and their own children. Life is painful. Food is painful because people must grow. Denying people food so they don't feel pain is starvation. Why is food painful? Because you're fucking starving. Why is milk and pork painful? Because you're starving. Okay? And so your hatred against me and the government is the system's power. Your lack of personal accountability is the system's power. The house was designed that way because a house will always win. In order to win, you have to change. Most of you can't do it. The house will always win. You never want to attack anything because the retaliation is that much worse. That's called death. Just look at the stabbing in Australia. He stabbed a bunch of people, and guess what the acceptable retaliation was? It was death. That's why you're doing yourself, that's what you're doing to yourself with your drugs, herbal remedies, and supplements, your alcohol, your surgeries, and food mitigation diets. Political about food. The retaliation is your death. Telling people that pork is poison when you've been falling apart for years. You probably needed the pork. You have accepted death as the retaliation. You've accepted death and destruction via government proxies. So what are you bitching for? Most of you have zero leg to stand on because you've been attacking yourself and your family for centuries. It's not the government's fault. They're just agreeing with you. You think your life is worth nothing. They have no problem agreeing with you. You are the ones who determine the worth of your life. The system will just help you end it as fast as possible. But first they need your signature. That's how they absolve themselves from karmic reactions. You signed on the dotted line. You gave your kids away to the system. You starved yourself. You took the drugs and the alcohol. You allowed the system to cut into you. You signed on the dotted line. Maybe it's time to change and save yourself, if you know what that means. If you know what that means anymore. I don't know. The system, scientists, and government play both sides of the fence. You better figure out how to discern what is appropriate for you, not somebody else. And so the symbol of justifiable deadly force against your own body, mind, and spirit, and family and pets and children in the remedies, surgeries, market, ending up in morgue someday is a person dying from a defensive gesture in a stabbing incident. Should defensive postures end up in the morgue? When you mischaracterize symptoms and when you put yourself in harm's way, it seems to be the culture. If defending your body and children's bodies end up in dies suddenly, then the justifiable deadly force of a stabbing incident will be the norm. So if defending your body and children's bodies ends up in dies suddenly, because of all the remedies and the surgeries and the food mitigation diets, then the justifiable deadly force of a stabbing incident will be the norm. We did it to ourselves. All death was a defensive posture against something that was not attacking us, but we mischaracterized it as an attack. And we used government officials as proxies against our own life. We used the medical, holistic, energy healing world and friends and family as proxies against our own life. We have used drugs and alcohol, denial and pleasure and paradise, and greed as proxies against our own lives. And we have the gall to blame somebody else for our own suffering. We did it to ourselves and children. So I don't want to hear you blaming the government for anything when you have purposely done things harmful to yourself and your own children, calling it love and healing. When you purposely withheld food from your children because you said it was poison, when you had no intention to get over food allergies, you employed war proxies against your own family and friends. And let me tell you, I'm suffering along with you because I'm not disconnected from you. I'm in relative peace, but watching all this go down is a suffering. Watching you guys blame everyone but yourselves is a suffering. Watching the denial is suffering. Before you blame the government for anything, maybe get off the pot and the alcohol and the drugs and remedies and the surgeries. Then you might actually have a credible leg to stand on. And I can assure you, most of you don't have that situation, so you will blame until the very end. And then you'll hate me for pointing it out. No one's going to point it out to you in your own world because you surround yourself with people who are codependent. They enabled all your learned helplessness. People like me are extremely hated because we don't play the same games that you play. Personal accountability is very rare in our society. That's why your friends don't want you to change, because then they would have to change and face who they have been and are. And so if they surround themselves by mirrors, they'll never have to take any accountability. They'll never have to question anything. And they can just be happy and blame somebody and hate people because they can't face their own bullshit. And so if you are harming yourself with remedies and surgeries and drugs and liquor and you have no room to condemn anyone for anything, for attacking and retaliating. Okay? So that's kind of the short of the long of it, the long and the short of it. But nobody has any room to blame anyone for anything when they actively destroy themselves. Okay? You have no room to say that it's the government's fault when you are actively harming yourself with drugs, alcohol, cannabis, in denial, won't change a damn thing. And so that's fine. You can run your hamster wheel into the ground and say it's somebody else's fault. And believe me, that's happening. So, yeah. But yeah, your starvation, your lack of change, using the remedy system, your intolerance, what you post on Facebook, you have built a case against yourself. When you're showing everybody that you're doing drugs and you're out there in the sun all the time and it's an accelerated environment, you're building a case against your own future demise. When you can't say, hey, I made a mistake somewhere, when you can't repent for the transgressions you did against yourself, your children, your family, your friends, then you've built a case for died suddenly. And you'll have someone to blame. Believe me, the system will give you every way to absolve yourself from any responsibility. You'll have the drugs, you'll have the religion, you'll have the politics, you'll have your science, you'll have your friends and family to support you in whatever manner you choose to go out. Blaming on the way out the door. That's why you were given the politics, the religion, the science dogmas. So that way when the hidden hand finally presses the lever and does this, and this, and you can't see it, and you can't prove it exists, the case is laid out. Just look at their Facebook. Look what they have promoted. Look at their religion. Look at their science. Look at their politics. You see them post about, they only eat organic. They don't eat meat. Well, you're in starvation. Look at they don't eat pork. Look, they don't eat this. They're out there hanging out with people, taking on microbes. And now I'm mentioning the sun and how deadly the sun is right now. My husband's like, I can't handle this, Jillian. He's tripping on me. I mean, not like he can handle it, but I mentioned like, well, when I go out in the boat with you, I do want to wear sunglasses, really dark sunglasses and everything. And, and if you do get your catfish boat all figured out, have some kind of visor so it can protect us from the sun type of thing if we're sitting out waiting for a catfish to bite. So, he's just like, oh my God, the sun's now poisoned. Well, yeah, it always has been. But now with all the reflective particulates, yeah, it's even more aggressive. It's like LED versus the 60 watt, 40 watt soft light bulbs. LED are freaking blinding. They'll melt your retinas. But if you don't have pain receptors, which people don't have pain receptors behind their eyes, so they're out there in the sun all the time, on the water, in the ocean, at the beach, in the snow, hanging out with friends and family, out there on their deck, in the elements, and so aggressive. They've laid the groundwork for died suddenly. If they're out there with celebrities, taking all the celebrity juices and all the celebrity remedies and frequencies and all that shit, they're taking their remedies and their surgeries and all the cannabis. They've built a case against their own future demise. That's what the system wants you to see. Because people's beliefs, their radicalized beliefs, have laid the groundwork for their future died suddenly. And these poor kids, when as soon as the climate shifts like that, so aggressively, some of these kids won't survive. Well, you're already seeing it now. I don't even have to say, well, what if? It's already happening. Died suddenly, so these kids are 13, 12, 11, 30, 50. Isn't that alarming to you? But people are like, no, it's not. It's supposed to happen. Or it's the V's. It's their fault. The denial is what lays the groundwork as well. So you don't need someone like Johnny Cochran anymore. Just look at people's Facebooks. They're laying the arguments and the groundwork for their own future death. And they'll blame somebody, of course, for it. That's your world. Bye.